Well, welcome everyone to Unpunched. I'm here with Adam Wyse. He's the winner of an Ion Award for Best Light Game, the Golden Arbutus Award, creator of such hits as Guerrilla Marketing, Mask of the Red Death, and Head of Household, and co-developing the upcoming Skyrise.
I'm Adam Wyse. I'm a local game designer and developer from Calgary, Alberta. I work in the board game industry full time now. I work for Roxley Games, and I've designed a few minorly popular games a few years ago. Guerrilla Marketing, Mask of the Red Death being the most popular ones, but also Head of Household and Poetry Slam.
Question: Where did your board game design journey begin?
I feel it was about a decade ago at this point, where I think the first modern board game I played that really got me interested in these types of games was Catan. My brother got it and invited us over to play some games, and I was kind of blown away, like a lot of people are, playing a modern game and seeing the kinds of things that were possible and experiencing mechanics that you'd never seen before and stuff like that. So I quickly, I assume, got onto Reddit or something, board games group, just to like check into what else am I missing out on? What other games should I play right now? One of the early ones that I discovered was Space Alert, and that's still one of my most favorite games. We got together to play it regularly and got to be a really cohesive space crew. And it really kindled this love of games. I started building my collection, and then I was working as an engineer at the time, a software engineer. So I was designing things during the day. And I started thinking about how I would go about designing a board game, like what I'd want to see or what I would want to play, something that didn't exist or to my knowledge didn't exist. And then started tinkering around from there. That was my entry into game design.
Do you find that there was skills that you could use in your software engineering career to transition into game designing?
Yeah, I feel I have a really good math background. I like and being able to visualize how something's going to work in my head very well before actually needing to go ahead and test it. Uh, and I feel those are skills that I developed through software. Um, and yeah, really help. We're an asset in game design as well.
Was there a group that you kind of joined up with to start, working on ideas and such like and stuff like that?
Early on, there was a group I came across when I attended my first FallCon, which is the local Calgary board game convention. Um, I didn't know there was a designer group in the city at all, but I came across Paul Saxberg running a demo table and a bunch of designers showing off their games. And uh, me and my wife and my sister had gone to FallCon. We're blown away by the game library and all the people enjoying these games and everything. And I had brought one of my prototypes that I had only played with family and friends to that point, Mask of the Red Death. And I came across this designer group and this designer table, and everyone was very welcoming and wonderful. And it was nice to play some other people's games and then get mine on the table as well. And from that point, I started, I think it was the very next week after FallCon, started joining the weekly designer meetups at the local store, the Sentry Box, to get my game in front of other designers and get good solid feedback week to week. And having that week to iterate your game and then bring it back and and try the new changes with other people who are doing the same iterative process was really, really useful. And that was a great start in my design process.
Nice. What do you enjoy most about that playtesting kind of environment? Is there things that were really good that came out of that?
That playtesting environment with working with a bunch of other designers, it's really useful because people learn to not hold back. It's quite easy when you're playing with family and friends to get the feedback. Oh, this is amazing! This is wonderful! Everything's positive. And it's harder to get critical feedback. But when you're playing with other designers who are all looking to improve each other's games, you set your ego at the door, or you try to, and take feedback as a positive thing, even when the feedback is negative, because everyone's going towards that same goal of improving your game. And I think a designer group like that is really useful for being harsh and critical when it needs to be harsh and critical.
I guess, what do you think that people should support local game designers on their journey? What do you think is important about that?
It's really neat to have creators building things locally, and most people that discover that there is a game design community really are really intrigued by it. Everyone wants to support people in their own community doing things, and being able to support by playtesting, even if you're not a designer, is so useful. To get more eyes on games is awesome. And anyone who I've told I design games is usually so into it and are interested in trying them out and let me see them sometime and stuff. And it's great to have a group like that and support from local people.
Nice. So I'm a regular Joe Schmo on the street. I have this idea for a game that I really think is going to be really good. Could be the next big thing. What sort of advice or direction would you give a first-time developer?
There's many ways to get into it, but I feel if you've got an idea, you want to find some uh, other a design group, for instance. Well, first build a prototype, get something made. That's the biggest thing. I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Get it out of your head. It doesn't need to be perfect. It shouldn't be perfect. Just start making, and that's the biggest key. As soon as you have something in front of you, it'll inspire new ideas. So it'll start that ball rolling. And so it's really important to just get that first viable prototype first. If your game in your head is going to be 150 cards and it's going to be all this stuff, make like 15 cards. Try to get a little bit of a system working, because if you build too much before you actually put it on the table, you're going to revise it so many times throughout the process. So eliminate some of that rework by just starting with something small, trying it by yourself, simulating other players around the table, and then try it out with friends or family, even if the critique might not be very harsh. But from there, as you're building it, try to find others who are interested in game design. There's lots of good resources online. Whether or not you have a local store or meetup group available. The next step I took from there, generally, once I felt I had games that were kind of coming along, I found a really useful resource in game design contests. And I know you've done this as well. It's things like the Canadian Game Design Award, the Ion Award. It really gives you a couple things. One of them being a time limit, where you have to submit your game to this contest by this particular time. So you have a structure to when you need to get things to a certain point. you kind of need to sell or pitch your game a little bit, oftentimes with a sell sheet or a little explanation video. So you get good at like teaching your game and explaining what's interesting about it. And then as a result of those contests, you're going to get feedback, whether it's positive or negative or whatever. All feedback is very valuable. So I find game design contests are a really useful part of the process. I started entering them with games that were very bad early on in my game design career, and I found it just as useful as when I started being a finalist in certain awards and things.
Do you find that there is other skills that you get by entering these contests that you wouldn't normally have a chance to flex?
Yeah, definitely. When entering these contests, I found I built up so many other skills that I didn't think would be applicable in game design, like video editing and a bunch of things. I was recording videos of myself, and then, okay, my audio is not good enough. How can I fix that? And then I was dealing with like lighting, and I got like lighting things off Amazon to just like improve my videos a little bit. And uh, you get better at graphic design because you're trying to make your game a little prettier to make the iconography make sense or whatever. So there's so many little skills that you build up throughout game design. I found it really fulfilling in that way.
Nice. Let's go back to your first game, Mask of the Red Death. That's now since been published. It's come out. It's really fantastic, gorgeous product. What was sort of why did you gravitate to that theme with those game mechanics?
I loved the story of Mask of the Red Death. So I think we read it in grade 8 English class. And I've always loved Edgar Allan Poe. I've always loved horror stories, horror movies. And something about that story in particular, the foreboding and the dread and the macabre nature of the whole thing, really clicked with me back in grade 8. And it was totally out of my mind. Basically, I had forgotten about it entirely until a little while into my game designing, and something, I can't even remember what it was, but something reminded me about that story. And I was like, this would make an incredible board game. Like the setting itself of these 7 colored rooms, that just screams that's a game board right there. And you've got this theme, you've got a feeling, this dread and this like time. You've got the clock. You've got this. All of these elements really spoke to me like this could totally be a game. So I started delving into what kind of feeling I wanted to evoke from the game. The hopelessness and not knowing enough information as midnight strikes. I knew that despite in the story where everyone dies, I wanted players to have a chance to survive. I wanted it to be hard though. Um, so I just like kind of listed off all these things and brainstormed about what is it about the story that's interesting, what could translate well into a board game, what would I need to change, and then just started building from there basically.
Right. So that one you had the story in mind and kind of built out from that. Do you find that's a lot of the cases, or do you find that you've changed, you've started with mechanics, or you've started with other ideas before moving on?
I've designed other games based on mechanics entirely, like my game Head of Mousehold. I wanted to build a game where you're trying to come in second place. And so I started thinking of what theme would fit trying to come in second place. So mousetraps came to me, where the fastest mouse is going to get snapped by the mousetrap, and the second mouse is going to come and get the cheese. So I thought the mechanic was interesting, just trying to not be the best, just be the second best, and built the game's theme on top of that after I had the mechanics. I even, I guess, have an example of building a game based on components. I had a while into my game design, a lot of times at the designer meetups and stuff, people will have bring a box of components or things that they have no use for anymore or whatever, or they got all these stickers or blocks or whatever. Does anyone want these? So Tom, friend and fellow designer, brought all these like rainbow blocks to one of our meetups, and actually there was a whole bunch of educational blocks, but I focused on these rainbows, and I started playing around with them on the table and asked if I could take these. And within a few weeks, I had built the core of a rainbow building game just based on these components. Like, oh, this is kind of interesting that these stack together in this certain way. And I have a game that is coming out later this year, or will be on Kickstarter later this year, that was all based on a component rather than a theme or a mechanic.
Was there any points in your journey where you had doubts on, whether or not this is right for me as a career?
Definitely. I had no idea that this would ever become a career, for one thing. Um, it was kind of as I started to have a little bit of success getting some games signed and published, um, I knew that there's not much money in it from a designer unless you have an enormous hit. So I was not expecting to ever be working in the board game tabletop industry, but um, eventually I was laid off. So from an engineering job, and me and my wife had been talking about the possibility of what if we downsized our house and were able to live off her income alone? And would that be a feasible thing if I were to transition maybe to trying this game design thing a little more seriously? And then as we were like partway through the process, we had downsized our house and done a bunch of preparation towards it. I'm laid off. And what we were kind of working towards doing in maybe half a year or a year later was suddenly like, okay, do I do this right now? So I kind of jumped right into it. Um, it didn't last too long because we very quickly were like, I don't know if we got stressed out about money basically. Um, so fortunately for me, around that time, Gavin Brown of Roxley Games was looking to grow his business, and I'd known him from the designer meetups and from FalCon a little bit. We had played games together and such, and he was looking for more help helping to grow Roxley, and it was kind of perfect timing for my situation. And so we got in touch and started working out details, and he hired me on for Roxley. So now I'm doing logistics and board game design full time.
Right. I guess let's talk about Skyrise coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about that game?
Yeah. So Skyrise is a game we've been developing at Roxley for a few years now. It's been a long process. Um, it is based on a game called Metropolis by Sebastian Pachon. Um, and it's a spatial auction game at its core, basically. You have a bunch of buildings of various heights with numbers on the bottom, and you're placing these buildings as bids, with the number on the bottom being their bid value, into neighborhoods. And so there'll be a chain of bids. If I bid my 25, you could bid higher into an adjacent neighborhood. Um, and someone could bid higher as we go around. Eventually, everyone's going to pass, and only one of the winning bid is going to be constructed and flipped over, and all the other buildings come back. So it's got this really interesting spatial auction because you're not only outbidding people by numbers, but the bids need to be placed in locations that are adjacent to the most recent bid. So that core mechanic from Metropolis was really interesting when it had been one of Gavin's uh, favorite games, and or at least a game that really intrigued him from the past that he had played. So he got in touch and got the rights, signed the game, um, and got the rights to be able to develop it further. So, in a similar way that Roxley had done to Brass Birmingham, taking that core brass system and building a bunch of new mechanics and new systems around it, using that interesting core. We're doing the same with Skyrise, taking what we love and adding other things that we find interesting. And we've been iterating it for a long time now. It's looking really beautiful. It's one of the first, I guess, the first Roxley game that has, well, Dice Throne had miniatures, but this has lots of little miniature buildings, and the 3D models of the islands that you're building on are just amazing. It looks awesome. I can't wait. It's going to be on Kickstarter later this month, and I can't wait to see the reception.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to see that one go through the roof. You're talking about remaking a lot of classic games, and Roxy had Brass, and now this. Do you feel like there's still a treasure trove of classic games that need to get that update and remade?
Definitely. There's so many great games that have been made throughout the years, and I find so much value in going back and playing older things. It can't always be about the newest, shiniest new game out there. I like being able to replay the games in my collection and going back to older things. And there's a lot of brilliant stuff that's been done, especially in a time when the production values and the graphic design and a lot of other things were kind of not where they are now. I feel games these days have to have a lot more polish to be able to be noticed in this vast sea of many releases. Um, if you release Carcassonne today and no one knew anything about it, with that older style of art and just like simpler game, even though it's such a brilliant game, it probably wouldn't get noticed.
Yeah, that's sort of a great way to kind of let people experience that game, a second time for people who are new to gaming. Yeah, what's been your experience with Kickstarter? How's that been supportive in new games coming out?
Kickstarter is really what allows a small company like Roxley to be able to do what we do. And when I say small company, we are a small company. It's tough when people see it from the outside and they see the everything, the production of a game. It looks like I've seen comments before online about how Roxley's one of the big companies and stuff, but it's truly such a small little team. Kickstarter is what allows us to have the funding to be able to produce these games. You don't have vast sums of money in a bank account to be able to fund a print run. Freight costs are so expensive these days. Getting your games overseas to the various fulfillment partners that we use all over the world. There's so many upfront costs, and margins on board games aren't that vast. They're quite tight. So it's really useful to be able to get this funding up front to actually be able to make the vision of something that we want to create.
Yeah, I was just saying, what misconceptions do you feel that people who are backing Kickstarters have on their experience?
There's a lot of negativity in Kickstarter comments, as we can all see. It I wish people could be more positive and less critical. It's a tough thing to be making games. at all steps of the process, the manufacturing, the we try to communicate as well as possible, but a lot of times there's things you can't say and there's things you don't want to release just yet. But fulfillment is difficult. You're dealing with partners in different parts of the world sometimes, and there's delays in communication, there's delays in stock arriving, there's customs holding up your games, and everything comes back to you because you chose a particular route and a certain way of doing things. Even though things can sometimes be out of your control, you have to take responsibility for it. But it's very tough when it's so easy to criticize online, and negativity can build up because you've got a couple voices and then a couple more people add their voices in, and it sounds like it's an enormous mob at the door. But I think I've gone off track with this question a little bit, but I just wish the Kickstarter space was a little bit more positive. Realizing that there's real people behind every step of the game creation process, and they're not trying to cheat you. They were just trying to get their vision out into the world and get you at this game.
I guess I want to kind of like touch back, I guess, on your designing career. I did want to follow up on a question. Did you have any designers that you were inspired by for games?
Yeah, I feel I mentioned Space Alert as one of my favorite games, and that's designed by Vlada Chvetil. I probably mispronounced his name, but I've always been inspired by his collection of game designs. They're so varied and different. It feels like he would see, oh, I've never done that before. I want to try to do something in this space. Oh, I want to do a party game. I want to do a real time game. I want to do a heavy civilization building game. All these things, every game is so different from the others. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with my designs as well. I've done party games, a couple of word games, little card games. Mask of the Red Death is quite different from a lot of different games. And I kind of wanted to do that same kind of thing that I imagined him when sitting down to come up with something new and having an inspiration to do something entirely original. So that's kind of what I tried to keep in my head as well when sitting down and trying to come up with some new ideas.
That kind of ties into my follow-up where I was going to say, do you feel like with all the games that you've designed that there is sort of a through line of design idea that connects a lot of these games in similar fashion?
Not much. They're kind of disparate in very different genres, like I was saying. But one thing, I don't know. One thing I do find, and maybe that's just common amongst all game designers, is when you see a review of your game online and you're just like, oh, that person just doesn't get it. They don't think the same way that I do. And that seems to be common amongst different games. Oh, they and I don't know what I'm saying exactly. I don't know if there is much of a through line other than my love for certain things like word games or real time or having imperfect information is not something that everyone or even most people love. I think my taste in games is maybe different from the norm to such a way that maybe my games are less popular because they're different from the norm a little bit too.
I guess let's talk about the future of game design. Where do you see game design moving going forward? You had mentioned a tabletop simulator, an online platform where people can get together to play games, has been kind of lighting up. Do you feel like there is room for growth in that space, or do you feel like the conventional space where it's at can still be improved upon?
Yeah, when it comes to the future in game design, I do feel that tools like Tabletop Simulator are very important going forward. It just makes the iterative process so much faster. But I don't think it'll ever leave behind um, being being able to create a physical prototype, being able to bring it to conventions and pitch it in person. I feel that's very important because we're making physical products after all. So eventually, at some point, these things are going to be made. So there's certain aspects. There's a lot in a physical prototype that you don't get when you're playing online. There is the tactile sensations of dice, the sounds of pieces clicking together, um, things like the bag of tiles in Azul, being able to like reach through the bag and have them all clicking and draw some out and put them on the factory displays is such a neat tactile sensation that if you were playing Azul just digitally, you don't get that at all. There's a lot of magic that happens at a table, um, not only from the components but from the interactions with other players across the table as well. It's quite different being in person and being with people rather than just uh, maybe being on a Zoom call, maybe just being text chat in a digital playtest. But yeah, there's definitely both the physical and the digital playtesting will never go away. They each have a useful space going forward, I feel.
Yeah, I don't think I've played a game of Catan where I didn't organize or stack the pieces specifically, playing my own little mini game while people are deciding whether or not to trade their sheep.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, there's so many little aspects in a board game that you lose when you go onto a digital space. It's really really the heart of a lot of the games that we play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess where can people find out more about the games that you're working on?
I suppose the best spot would probably be my Board Game Geek page. Whenever I have a new design or whatever that's linked through Board Game Geek. Board Game Geek is a really great resource, great website for that. I don't have a personal web page or anything, but um, because I work for Roxley, any game that we put out, I'll have some hand in. I do uh, a lot of the rule books these days, at least the core of it. I have a lot of help and people providing input, but anything Roxley, so roxley.com, I'll be involved in all that kind of stuff, but my board game page as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Adam Wyse, for your time. I appreciate it, and it's been great chatting with you about all the games that we love.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much
Yeah.
for having me.